A second explanation for the repetitive information in Pasuk 8 is suggested by the Footnote. Taking note of the nuanced change between the two Pasukim, in that in Pasuk Zayin we have Ve'et Mishmeret Kol Ha'eda, and in Pasuk Chet Ve'et Mishmeret B'nai Yisrael, the Footnote suggests that the B'nai Yisrael of Pasuk 8 refers to the nation as a whole, that B'nai Levi were acting as shlichim for the nation, whereas in Bamidbar 3:7 the Kol Ha'eda refers to the leadership, the Sanhedrin of the day, and that B'nai Levi also acted on behalf of the leadership. If we adopt the Footnote's distinction between B'nai Yisrael and Eda, this would undermine the thesis of the Rebbe regarding the two roles for which B'nai Levi were responsible. Evidence in support of the Footnote's suggestion that Eda refers to the leadership comes from two sources. The first from Bamidbar 14, in which we have an account of the impact upon the B'nai Yisrael following the return of the Meraglim from Eretz Canaan. Parak 14 opens with a statement that Vatisa Kol Ha'eda, the Eda was stirred up and raised their voices, possibly in panic. Vayibchu ha'am b'layla hahu, and the nation wailed, they cried on that night. Statements are made about two groups of people, the Ha'eda and the Ha'am, for which Rashi maintains that the Ha'eda refers to the leadership, the Shivim Zekenim, whereas Ha'am refers to the nation as a whole, thus demonstrating that the term Eda, as used by the Chumash text, refers to the leadership of the nation. A second piece of evidence comes to us from Vayikra 4:13. The pasuk deals with the karbanot that are brought as a sin offering. The subject here is V'im kol adat Yisrael yishku. If the adat Yisrael make a mistake, v'ne'elam davar me'enei hakahal, the matter was not detected, was hidden from the eyes of the congregation, v'asu achat mikol mitzvot Hashem asher lo tahasena, and they violate any of the commandments from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they had been commanded not to do, in other words, an act that was prohibited, thereby v'ashama, they incur guilt. And the pasuk goes on to state what the process should be in such circumstances. Once again, in this pasuk there are two groups mentioned. One is the Kol Adat Yisrael, and the other is the Hakahal, to which Rashi in his commentary defines the Adat Yisrael as the leadership and the Kahal as the nation as a whole. And we are dealing here with the nation violating a commandment en masse caused by the halachic decision handed down by the Adat Yisrael. On this basis, the Footnote suggests that Pasuk Zayin relates to the responsibilities that were originally given to the Shivim Zekenim with respect to the Mishkan and now transferred to B'nai Levi, whereas Pasuk Chet refers to the responsibilities that had been given to the B'nai Yisrael, the nation as a whole. With this reading of the text, once again, the thesis of the Rebbe that there were two aspects to the role of B'nai Levi no longer has a textual basis and therefore is possibly invalid. The Rebbe in the footnote goes on to provide three reasons as to why the line of thinking of the Footnote is not tenable. Reason number one, if the Eda refers to the Shivim Zekenim, then Rashi should have made that distinction in the commentary to this pasuk, which he does not. Secondly, there is nothing in the Chumash text up until this point in time that links the Shivim Zekenim to the Mishkan, for which the pasuk now transfers that responsibility over to B'nai Levi. And thirdly, Rashi himself, in his commentary to Pasuk Tet, maintains that the use of the word Eda in this context does not refer to the Shivim Zekenim, but rather refers to the B'nai Yisrael as a whole. Pasuk Tet states that B'nai Levi are Netunim Hema Lo Me'et B'nai Yisrael. We discussed this Rashi in part 1, where Rashi firstly reads into the Mi'et as if it was written Mitoch B'nai Yisrael, from amongst the B'nai Yisrael, rather than from the B'nai Yisrael, and then goes on to write that B'nai Levi have been Mishar Kol Ha'eda Nivdulu Lekach. They have been separated away from the rest of the Eda. If, as the Footnote maintains, that the Eda refers to the Shivim Zekenim, then Rashi's wording should have read Mishar Kol B'nai Yisrael rather than Mishar Kol Ha'eda Nivdulu Lekach. And therefore, in rejecting the Eda equals these Shivim Zekenim option, the thesis of the Rebbe that the two Pasukim reflect two aspects of the role of B'nai Levi remains valid.